There's a very fun quote that I really like, which is, Britain and America are two nations divided by a common language. Which kind of means that even though we both speak English, sometimes it's kind of hard to communicate with each other. So a very long time ago, and this is not a personal story, so I'm not talking about 5 or 10 years ago, I'm talking about like 200 years ago, there was a big battle, the Battle of Waterloo, which is extremely famous in European history. You've heard of Napoleon. Napoleon is basically trying to take over all of Europe, and the other countries are kind of trying to stop him. And at the Battle of Waterloo, British and Prussian forces, Prussia being basically Germany, proto-Germany, pre-Germany, come together and they stop him. And it's a very famous battle, and if you're into history at all, or European history, you should look into it. I'm not going to say too much about it. So during that battle, there are two British commanders. One is the Duke of Wellington, and the other one is the Earl of Uxbridge. And they're riding along on their horses. And there's battle going on, there's shooting, there's cannons firing, and all of a sudden the Earl of Uxbridge's leg gets blown off. I don't know exactly what it means, because later he has surgery to get it properly taken off, but basically it gets blown off. To which the Earl of Uxbridge turns to the Duke of Wellington and says, "By God, I believe I've lost my leg." And the Duke of Wellington says, "By God, I think you have." Now the point of the story is, I'm trying to sell it the way they're selling it, which is like, if someone gets their leg blown off, you don't go, "By God, I think I've lost my leg." You say, "Holy shit, where's my leg? What happened? Oh God, my leg is gone," right? But the point is that there's this kind of cultural thing, and this story is very famous for this piece of British culture, which is what some people call the British stiff upper lip, which is in the face of very emotional things, British people don't waver. They kind of remain calm and stay, they kind of maybe undersell things sometimes. They do the opposite of exaggerating. And this story is really famous for it because, if you lose your leg in battle, usually you're screaming and shouting, but instead they just carried on and said, "Well, by God, I think you've lost your leg. By God, I think I have." Now, this is, the term stiff upper lip, I guess I've never really used it, but it is a well-known term, which just means like, don't get emotional. When you're about to cry, your upper lip will sometimes shake a little bit, or even when you're just emotional, you're like, and your lip will shake. So sometimes we'll say, like, if somebody's about to like feels really bad, or they're about to get emotional, we say like, keep a stiff upper lip. It's really an old term. You don't really need to use it, but and we talk about this with British people a lot. That sometimes we call it the British stiff upper lip, because British people are famous for doing this, especially I think rich, aristocratic, high society British people are very famous for saying like, "Oh, it looks as though my mother's passed away. Well, that's a shame." Now that's exaggeration. I don't want to put this on, but I'm just trying to show you that there's this cultural stereotype maybe, but I think it's at least partially true about British people being kind of calm and reserved and not being overly emotional. Now, why is this interesting? Well, to me it's interesting because Americans are kind of the exact opposite. Many of us are kind of loud and I don't want to say obnoxious, but maybe obnoxious. We're kind of taught from a young age, we're kind of to compete for attention, try to be the leader, and you need to sell something, you need to sell an idea, and you need to be very forceful about things, and go like, "Oh my God, my leg's gone, oh shit," and sell things like that. And that's why that phrase is really cool, like two nations divided by a common language. Now, my dad is from England. I've been to England many times. It's been at least a year of my life in England. So I'm kind of relatively familiar with some British words that we don't really use in America. And a lot of Americans aren't, British people are familiar with American words because of so much American media getting to England, so much music and television, movies and stuff. And we get some British media, but not nearly that much. So there's a lot of words, like the most famous one is British people say lift, we say elevator. Less famous ones, like they say the boot of a car, we say the trunk of a car. They call semi-trucks lorries. And a lot of Korean people think like, wow, there's this big difference between British English and American English. And not really. Like, there's just like, it's like 99.9% the same, except for like a few of these little words like lift and elevator. But our problem isn't from the words. A lot of the times, even if you know a language very well, and you know all the words, and you know all the grammar, it's not the words that throw you off. It's the way that they're said. It's the culture behind the words. Like I said, these British guys, I mean, some British people really downplay everything, and a lot of American people really upplay everything, say everything's amazing and awesome. And I made another video about that. You can check it out. And you might say, okay, well, this doesn't seem like a big deal. But there's actually another story which is maybe more relevant to Korean people, which is during the Korean War, there was a spot being held by 600 British soldiers at the Imjin River. I had never heard of it. Maybe it's very famous in Korea. And there's 600 British soldiers holding that spot. And then a wave of 30,000 Chinese soldiers comes rushing over the hill. Now, you have 600 British people against 30,000 enemy soldiers. Sounds pretty fucked up. Sounds like you're in a lot of trouble. Sounds like shit is going down. Sounds like you need to do something quick. Sounds like an emergency situation, right? So when the British commander sees this, he radios UN headquarters. And at UN headquarters, there's an American commander, general, whatever. And the British guy radios in and he says, "We're in a bit of a sticky situation." Now, just to give you some reference, if I'm like in San Diego driving around downtown and I can't find a parking spot, so I'm gonna be like 5 minutes late, I'll call up my friend and say, "Hey, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late. I'm in a bit of a sticky situation." Like, for me, not being able to find a parking spot is a sticky situation. Like making toast and finding out you have no butter. That's a sticky situation. I mean, actually, nobody really says that term very much, but it sounds very like minimal, not a big deal. And that's what it sounded like to the American general. The American commander said, "Oh, sticky situation? Well, that's not good, but it's not the end of the world." So they didn't reinforce those 600 soldiers. They didn't tell them to withdraw. The soldiers just stayed there. And in fact, I think they went back to some hill to like defend the hill a little better and have a better vantage. But they sat there, and those 600 British soldiers fought 30,000 Chinese soldiers. And they ended up losing, but they fought really valiantly, and I think they ended up defeating 10,000 or killing 10,000 Chinese soldiers, and there's only 600 British people, and then 500 British people got captured. And at the time, it was credited with actually saving Seoul from being recaptured. Although later I looked into it, and some people say like that's probably an exaggeration. But the point is, in this situation, even though you have a British person and an American person, and they're in a situation where they're not fucking around. Okay, people are not trying to be polite, and people are not trying to, you know, not hurt someone else's feelings. This is war, and this shit is serious. But the way that British people talk in this kind of underplayed tone versus the way Americans listen and the way we talk, which is upplaying everything, there was a serious communication problem. This story really happened. And I have a lot of Korean friends who think like, "Do you know British English?" They'll ask me that. And there is no British English. It's not that much different from American English that you would call it like a different kind of English. But there are some cultural situations where like in that story, you have a real misunderstanding due to the culture. Now, I'm mainly telling this story because a lot of my fans are interested in English, and it's kind of just an interesting story, and it's about culture, and there's really not much of a tie to Korean culture. But I will say this, and this happens to me all the time. Like, I'll be reading a Korean sentence, and I know all the words, and I know all the grammar, and I still can't quite get it. And I don't want to say it's just because of culture. It's probably just because I'm not that used to the words or whatever. But I've seen so many Korean friends, I'd say, bashing their heads against the wall, not literally but figuratively, because English is this insurmountable problem, and it's the world language, and you just want to hang out with foreigners, and you want to watch American television or whatever. And I see all these Korean people dying to learn English, and I want to say, even British people can't understand American English sometimes, or I should say the opposite. Even American people can't understand British English sometimes, not because of the words, not because of the grammar, but merely because of the culture behind it. So if you like my video, give it a thumbs up. If you hate my video, give it a thumbs. So if you agree with me or don't agree with me, of course leave comments. If you have something to add, leave comments. Always leave comments because I love comments. Remember, every Friday at 7 p.m. these videos come out. So if it's after 7 p.m. and it's Friday, please check it out. And of course, the most important thing. Have a super awesome day.